I've been working at the thrift store for about a week before I stumbled across the box. I say working, but it's more like volunteering. I'll save you the gory details, but needless to say that I screwed up after a night of drinking and ran into a bus stop with my car. Thankfully, it was 3 a.m., so there was no one in it, and the judge decided not to ruin my life over a mistake. He gave me community service and told me it better never happen again. Community service was ideal since I was in college and I ain't got a lot of money. I also couldn't afford to get kicked out of college for going to jail neither. So with 36 weeks of community service to serve, I sat around working at my local thrift store, Charlie's Second Chances. It's a pretty easy job. I work in the back with the other court appointees. We clean and sort incoming items so that they can be placed on the shelves and priced. Most of my coworkers are also court-appointed screw-ups who do the bare minimum and get their cards punched by the boss every week. Unlike me, they usually leave the job and go to a second job to pay the bills, while I go to classes or head off to bed. It's not difficult work, but it's a pain and it cuts into my everyday life. I'd been on the line for a few hours, sorting boxes and cleaning items, when I noticed a box in the corner that I didn't think I'd ever seen before. The carton looked ready to split, and it was so dusty that it almost looked like it was held together by the gray dust that coated it. I left the box I was working on and walked over to inspect it closer. It was wedged beside a bookcase in a wall, clearly having fallen from the top of the case at some point or another. I tried to lift it out, but the carton tore and outspilled what I first thought was an ancient Dick Tracy costume. Inside was a hat, a fedora, but not sharp enough to gain the interest of today's fedora wearers, and a long coat that looked well worn and well cared for. The front was covered in mud, and some kind of water or muck discolored the hem. There was a pair of black boots as well, also covered in powdery mud. The whole mess threw up a cloud of brown dust as it spilled out, and I coughed as I stood up, waving my hands around to clear some of the dust out. When it cleared, I noticed the book at my feet. If the coat was dirty, then the book was filthy. It was a battered old journal, a leather relic that was bloated and water-ruined. It must have once been a handsome thing, but now it looked like the act of opening it might be enough to destroy it forever. I slipped it in my pocket and brought the clothes back to the line to process them. The coat would never pass inspection. It was much too dirty, so I decided to offer the boss a few bucks for it and take it home. It was a nice coat, good in the rain and snow, I figured. I took the hat, too, when I saw it in the garbage on the way to my car. There was no sense breaking up the set after all, and I really did think it would make a good detective costume if I wanted. I didn't remember the book until I traded my jeans for some comfy pajamas. I intended to stay in and study that night. The pants clattered loudly on the floor, and I realized that the bloated wreck had been in the back pocket the whole time. I didn't sit a lot at work, and it had been virtually forgotten about once I stuffed it back there. I took it out now and looked at it. The cover was moldy, the mold now a little more than green powder, and when I opened it up, the same dust as the boots puffed out. The first page proclaimed it to be the personal journal of K. Barger, private detective. The pages were worn and some of them were stuck together, but I could decipher enough to realize I had found someone's memoir. There were notes that this K. Barger had been keeping to write his own story with, once he got out of the game, as he called it. It detailed case after case where K. Barger had caught this person or that person, helping the Atlanta PD solve many difficult cases with his partner, Dom Forthwit. K had clearly been hoping to turn this story into a book after he retired, living off the tales of his exploits long after they'd ended. My psychology notes lay forgotten as I pored over the journal. On a whim, I Googled K. Barger, private detective, but came up with very little. A few old newspaper clippings and a squib about his disappearance, and an ad for Barger and Witt Detective Agency that still operated in Old Town. K. Barger became Killian Barger, and it looked like this was his old journal. I also found a squib in the paper about his old partner paying for information about Killian, who had disappeared on a case near 30 years ago. I looked at the journal now with new eyes. This thing could be worth some cash, it seemed. It was more than money, though, by this point. The more I read about Killian, the more intrigued I became. This guy had stopped everything from hitmen to drug lords, and most of it seemed to be because he was at the right place at the right time and knew the right thing to do. His journal entries made him sound idealistic, if not a bit naive, and I wanted to know more about him. More importantly, I wanted to know what had happened to him. I flipped to the end, the last few pages looking harried and sloppy, and found the entry I was looking for. The pages were smudged, but I could still read his meticulous notes as he detailed the case he'd begun on September 8th, 1981.
September 8th, 1981. I knew it was only a matter of time before Chief Walker came to us. We had been monitoring the Lost Lamb case files with some interest for the past few weeks. 15 missing children, all of them from different walks of life, but the police didn't take much notice until Jessica Bradley went missing. She didn't fit the usual pattern. She was from an upper-class family and would be missed. All those before her had just been from poor families, low-income houses, or street families that lived on the fringes. Dom and I had been beating the pavement, talking to these families, but now that someone who mattered had gone missing, I guess it's time for the chief to take notice. He hired us as consultants. We would find the kidnapper and turn the information over to the police. We would not involve ourselves any further than that. The police would take care of this, and there would be no need for such headlines as PD Duo Thwart Kidnapping Ring. We were working for the police, and as such would be under their supervision. Dom and I gave each other a look, silently agreeing that that was never going to happen. We began immediately. The families we had already spoken to had given us a pretty good starting place. All the kids, including Jessica, had been connected by their time spent at Little Lamb's house, a children's home/daycare center where Jessica often volunteered. The police suspected that the home was a front for some sort of shady dealings, but they couldn't prove anything. It looks like a great place to start for Dom and me.
The next 2 pages were stuck together pretty badly. They had become wet and were nearly fused together. I tried to pry them apart carefully, but as they came free, I could see some of the ink on the paper had come free with them. The first page was almost ruined, the date showing up as September 10th of the same year, but I could make out a few words scattered through the damage. I gleaned that they had gone to the children's home, asking questions of a childminder that he usually called Minder, and been asked to leave. They had stalked out of the building, but had found out very little. Dom thought they ought to speak with some of the families that let the kids stay there, but Killian wanted to break into the minder's office and see if he could find anything incriminating. I mulled over the information. The case seemed pretty cut and dry from here. Killian had the information he needed. He could simply pass it to the police and the case would be solved, right? The next few pages revealed how wrong I had been. Chief Walker needed more, it seemed. 5 nondescript white men in suits didn't give him a lot to go on. Dom struck out with his line of questioning. All the kids had been snatched from the home itself, and most of the parents were too distraught to be of much help. The next few pages were ruined. The waterlogged pages stuck together like flypaper, and parting them just seemed to muddy and ruin the message worse. They seemed to be covered in the same gunk on the bottom of the coat, dirty water or soapy mud or something. The journal picked up on September 15th, and the news was more optimistic.
September 15th, 1981. I found a lead, the first one in days. The organization that supports Little Lamb's House has been a local installation for generations. The Malden family can trace its roots back to the founding of Atlanta. They've been giving money to local businesses since this town was a wagon track. I saw a picture of their latest patron, Dexter Malden, and he was a dead ringer for the man I saw yelling at the minder that night. I may have stumbled onto some kind of child trafficking ring or underage sex scandal. Whatever he wants those children for, it can't be good. Dom thinks we should be careful with this information, but I say the sooner we bring it to light, the better. He's as eager to stop this pervert as I am, but the Maldens are an ancient and distinguished family. We need to bring the police into this. Bring the arm of justice down on their heads, and prove that money doesn't buy your way out of everything.
The next few pages came away easily, and I'm glad they did. The writing was blocky and scratched. Killian seemed to be very angry at whatever exchange he had had with the chief of police. His pen had nearly poked through the paper several times.
September 17th, 1981. Removed. We've been removed from the case. We took our findings to Chief Walker, and he proceeded to get his ducks in a row to talk to Mr. Malden. We returned to the office, expecting justice would be served. They would find the kids, and that would be that. Even if they didn't find them, they would find evidence to prove that it was them, and the appropriate parties would be taken in custody. Case closed. What we hadn't planned on was that the spineless chief of police would call us and tell us to back off. He said that Maldron's alibi was airtight and that we needed to leave this case alone. He removed us from the case, paid our outstanding fee, and told us he would call us if we needed any more help. If I'm honest, he sounded a little scared, too. Well, I won't be scared off this case. Maldron knows something, and I'll be damned if I let him turn me off the scent. I don't know what he's up to, but I mean to find out. Don wants to put it all behind us. We've been paid, let's just go, he says. Well, to hell with that. I'm going to solve this case, even if it kills me.
The next few entries, what I could read of them, were mostly supplemental. Killian sniffed out the leads, Dom tried to dissuade him, and Killian continued to pound the pavement. It was becoming like a real mystery story to me. Killian, in his devil-may-care attitude, Dom, the brave but cautious sidekick, and Dexter Maldon as Killian's foil. The two played a game of cat and mouse that seemed to infuriate Killian to no end. Maldon was very careful about cleaning up after himself, and Killian began to worry that he was going to be noticed. Then one night, things went off the rails. Killian got himself attacked.
September 23rd, 1981. I was working on the Lost Lamb case, despite what the Chief and Dom want. This case is deeper than I ever imagined, and it gets twistier the deeper I go. You see, Little Lamb's house is not the first children's home that Maldron has had a stake in. Every 8 to 10 years, he suddenly becomes interested in the plight of children. Orphanages, children's homes, halfway houses, children's hospitals, you name it. 10 years ago, there was another string of disappearances at Pine Rise that are reminiscent of this very crime. I tracked down a janitor that used to work there, an old man now. He told me a fascinating story about his time at Pine Rise. He told me about the night when the sound of crying children had woken him. He had been staying on the ground. He was their 24-hour caretaker, and his room was on the top of the stairs and overlooked the gathering area right in front of the double doors. Pine Rise had a grand staircase. It had once been a plantation house, and the double doors opened onto a large entryway that was overlooked by a wide, sweeping balcony. He remembered rising from bed, thinking that some of the children were out of bed past curfew, and walking out onto that balcony to see men herding children out into the cold October air. They were still in their night clothes, barefoot and frightened, but the men pushed them along without a second thought. One of the men looked up then, sensing the janitor's eyes on him. The janitor had recognized Dexter Maldron, the smiling man who had come just 2 days before to judge a sports day event for the little ones. He looked resplendent in his pinstriped suit, and he'd come up the stairs to put the man's cares to rest personally. He had heard I was looking for information on Maldron, God knows from where, and he had come to see me. He called me back tonight to tell me a very different story. He called me just before sunset and told me he needed my help. He said he was being followed. He said that something was tailing him, men or things or something, and he needed my protection. I asked him where he was, and he gave me the name of a bar about 20 minutes up the road. I pulled on my hat and headed out, the car grumbling pitifully about the cold as we drove. It was going to be a real howler this winter, you can already tell, but I don't think it'll get any colder than it did tonight for me. I can still feel that chill even now. When I pulled up to the bar, I saw the old duffer being walked into the alley by a broad fellow in a pork pie hat. He looked like a real outfit type, a hitter. I suddenly wondered if it was all about kids. Was the mob involved in this somehow? Maybe I was in too deep. I shoved my .38 in my coat, though, and went off after them. I'd worry about the details later. They were at the end of the alley, and I had just gotten my gun out and started to yell at them when I saw what they were doing. The big guy had his hands around the old guy's upper arms, hard enough to break bones, and the old guy was staring up at him like he was a serpent prepared to devour him. Then the thug's head and shoulders peeled back like a rotten banana, and what came out was so much worse than the porcine face that had been there. He was a living shadow, his skin like TV static and his eyes like fireplace coals. He opened his shifting mouth to reveal sewing needle teeth and a tongue like a boa constrictor. The teeth sank into the old man's face, and his scream was drank up by the hissing maw. It didn't eat him. Not really. The old man turned into that same static, his skin going the off-white of eggshell paint, and suddenly it was wafting into the creature as it slurped him up like a milkshake. The old man's clothes hit the ground when he finished with him, and my scream finally careened up my throat. It may have turned and looked at me, but I was already running by that point. I hopped in my car and was peeling up the road before my heart went below 160 miles an hour. I have never been afraid of anything. Not since I was old enough to know that people are the scariest thing out there. I've stepped into the ring with men who could have easily crushed me like a bug. I've gone up against men with more power than I can even dream of. I have never feared death. Death comes for all of us, whether we like it or not. God help me. I feared that thing.
The next few entries were Killian in Haddon. He was terrified that something was now following him, that the creature had seen him, and that any minute it would come driving through the door to have him. He was drunk more than he was sober, his notes often confusing, or his passages stained with alcohol as much as mud. He was a mess, his writing filled with fear and dismay. He was lost, his mooring having come undone, and it seemed that the case might have ended there, until he received the phone call.
October 1st, 1981. Final entry. I'm sitting in the parking lot of a campground in Panola State Park. The parking lot is full of expensive-looking cars. I hunkered down as I watched them lead kids into the woods about 2 minutes ago. I'm about to dog their heels once I get done laying out this last little refrain. The minder called me back today. He was crying, and if he's still alive tomorrow, I'll be astonished. He told me about how Malden had come to him, told him of his need, and told him how he could give him what he needed.
No, not even give them to him. He told me that I would stand aside and let them be taken. He told me I'd do these things, or he'd kill me.
Then he showed the man what he and his cronies truly were, and the minder had little choice but to step aside.
They ain't human, Mr. Barger. They're servants of something old and dark. He comes with the cold, they said, and he's ushered in by blood. The blood of the innocent will make him strong. The blood of the innocent will secure his power. They said I'd let them be taken, or I would be given to him as well.
And who is him? I asked, not really wanting the answer.
They didn't say his name. Wouldn't say his name. He's the one who comes from Strange. He's the one who ushers in the frost. He's the one who brings the change.
Why tell me this now? I asked.
Because tonight they will take the children to him. They will be gone after tonight, and maybe you can stop them, Mr. Barger. I certainly hope so.
He told me where they meant to go, and then he hung up. My .38 feels good in my hand right now. I'm preparing to make my way into the fire now and find out just what the hell is going on. If I don't come back, I hope whoever finds this knows what to do with it. If they do, tell Dom I'm sorry. If I don't make it out, tell him I hope he nails this son of a bitch.
And that was that, the last entry. I don't know what became of Killian Barger, but the news on the TV leads me to believe that it's happening again. They're calling them the Green Man killings, and if these kids were taken by the same group of wackos that are perpetuating these grisly killings, then I can guess what must have happened to Killian and those kids. I'm on my way to Atlanta with the journal now. I've been getting some pretty weird texts from my boss for the last few hours, though. He wants to know what happened to the box in the back room. He's curious to know if I moved it. He's offering to waive the rest of my community service. Just pencil whip the sheet if I bring that coat back. That was a few hours ago. Now the messages are becoming a little darker. He's telling me that if I bring the coat back now, nothing bad will happen. He's asking me if I know what I've done to myself. He's asking if I want to die, or if I'm willing to be reasonable and bring that coat back. I don't think I will, though. The coat and the hat look pretty good on me as I look at myself in the rearview mirror. Besides, I want to look sharp when I deliver this journal personally. I want Dom to recognize what I'm bringing him when I take it home. Good evening, everyone. It's me, Dr. Plague. Thanks so much for joining me for tonight's story. Well, long-time listeners... Good evening, everyone. It's me, Dr. Plague. Thank you so much for joining me for tonight's story. Well, longtime listeners of the show will know that that was the Baron Landred, reprising his role as Killian for tonight's story. I hope you enjoyed him. If you did, go have a look at his channel. I've left a link below. Before we sign off for the night, let's go ahead and thank our sponsors. Thanks to the Irish Devil for being our Spooky Ghost tier contributor. Thanks to Janet for being our Spooky Skeleton tier contributor. Thanks to Xaronana, Emily Coltsfoot, and Leslie Lou Riddle for being our Ghostly Reader tier contributor. And, of course, Glen Jenkins for being our Ghostwriter tier contributor. Thanks, everyone. We just couldn't do the show without you. If you enjoyed tonight's show, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Maybe hit that bell so you don't miss any of our spooky episodes. And maybe consider heading over to Patreon. For just $1 a month, you can get in on all the action. And for $5 a month, you can have your spooky a day early on a Tuesday or a Thursday. And you also get to choose a story for my Monday readings. Just send it my way, and we'll see if we can make it a part of our Monday reading segment. And as always, thanks for stopping by. Dr. Plague, signing off. Have a wonderful evening.